In 1906, President Teddy Roosevelt created the nation's first national monument designation. The purpose of this designation was to preserve for all Americans significant pieces of the country's history, ecology, geology, and beauty. All national monuments are designated by U.S. presidents and are chosen as their personal memorials of those most special parts of this great country. Memorials that they see a need to protect over all others. Some are big, some are small. Some garner large budgets and staff. Others, next to none. All were chosen by presidents who considered them the most important places to protect over all other places in the country. America's national monuments tell the story of the nation's past and present glory. Hello, I'm Jordan Murphy, and I'll be your guide as we visit 11 national monuments located in America's Pacific Northwest. In this program, we'll learn about the Native American tribes that once occupied this land, how two giants of conservation were able to urge Teddy Roosevelt to create our glorious national park system, and how an overzealous desire for national security can lead to fear and the loss of civil rights for American citizens. Behind me is one of the many spectacular lava tube caves a visitor is able to explore on a visit to Lava Beds National Monument.
Lava Beds National Monument is all things volcanic. The park itself contains part of the huge Medicine Lake volcano. Viewed from one of its cinder cones is Mount Shasta, the most prominent volcano of the Cascade Mountain Range in Northern California. Unlike her 13 sister Cascade volcanoes, volcanoes such as Mount Rainier, Mount Hood, and Mount St. Helens, the Medicine Lake volcano is a shield volcano.
It's different from the others. It's shaped like broad and flat, like a shield laying on its side on the landscape. So we are the largest volcano in the Cascades by area, and often people don't identify us as a volcano because we have this real low profile shape. We don't have a pointy top like Mount Shasta or Mount Rainier or Mount St. Helens. We had different kinds of eruptions, mostly small eruptions making lava tubes flowing across the landscape and small cinder cones all over the landscape as well. So we're very unique in terms of the volcanoes of the Cascades.
Lava Beds National Monument was set aside by President Calvin Coolidge in 1925. The most prominent cinder cone in the monument is Gangchen Butte. 530 feet in height, a winding trail leads to the top. Along the way, lichen-covered trees glisten in the morning sun, like some emerald kingdom of long ago. From the top, the two great lava flows contained in the park stretch to the north. Lava flows that at ground level are contorted into frozen giants, their blackened figures bent and curled. One can sense the power of this ancient lava as it oozed across the landscape, cooled, and then solidified into these bizarre shapes. Once again, looking down from above, are deep crevices, pit-like structures. These are places where the ceilings of lava tube caves have collapsed. Lava tube caves are what the monument is known for. There are more lava caves here than anywhere else in the United States. The over 700 caves here were formed by the irregular cooling of the molten lava as it flowed over the land. The result is a network of tube caves. Each cave is a distinct wonder. Entering a cave, one needs portable lights and caution. Deep in a few of the caves, ice glistens in the flashlight beams. Ice that stays all year long. At the entrance of two of the caves are some of the finest examples of pictographs. Ancient Native American rock painting. A second small unit of the monument preserves a wall containing many petroglyphs, symbols created by pecking the base rock. But it is the many tube caves that make Lava Beds National Monument a spelunker's dream come true. Lava Beds National Monument is the site of a unique piece of Western history. From 1853 to 1876, the Plains Indians fought the U.S. Army to a standstill. Known simply as the Indian Wars, it is the longest war in the nation's history. Mounted on horses, these fierce Indian warriors are known today by such famous battles as the Battle of the Little Bighorn, the Sand Creek Massacre, and the Nez Perce heroic flight to Canada. The names of these tribal chiefs are synonymous with the Old West: Sitting Bull, Geronimo, Chief Joseph, and Red Cloud. But in this area, the name is Captain Jack, the leader of the Modoc, one of the Great Basin Indian tribes.
Captain Jack's band, who lived in the southern part of the Modoc homeland here in the lava beds and its surrounding environments, because of these conflicts with settlers around Tule Lake and Lower Klamath and the Lost River in this border region of California and Oregon, were asked to move about 70 miles north to live with their neighbors, the Klamaths and the Yahuskin Band of Paiutes on the Klamath Reservation. And in the 1860s, they willingly did that. But conditions on the reservation were not pleasant, and they missed their homeland, as anybody might. So they came home, and conflicts continued to ensue with settlers and led to the beginning of the Modoc War in 1872. It was really not a big success for the U.S. Army in terms of Indian wars. It was very difficult to rout the Modocs out of the lava beds. They had a place called the Stronghold, which whites named it very aptly because it was a natural fortress that they were able to defend, even though they were outnumbered 10-to-1 by soldiers. So the government spent more dollars per enemy on this war than any other Indian war. They had a very high number of casualties per the number of Modoc warriors fighting against them, which was about 60. It was the only war in which a general was killed, the only Indian war. General Canby was killed during an attack on the Peace Commission by Captain Jack, although on the gallows he stated that it wasn't him that shot him.
The war was important in that it turned public opinion in the East against the Indians. A change in sentiment that ultimately led to an end of their way of life. A way of life one can only imagine here at the monument today. geology here is part of the larger story of the two-part story of the formation of the Cascade Mountain Range. The range that extends from Canada to Northern California. The first part of the story started around 40 million years ago, when the Farallon Oceanic Plate dove under the North American continent. One result was the pine-covered mountains familiar to everyone in the Pacific Northwest. The second part of the story occurred much later when another, smaller oceanic plate, the Juan de Fuca Plate, was subducted by the North American Plate. The results this time were the magnificent Cascade volcanoes, including the immense Medicine Lake volcano. Ecologically, Medicine Lake is at the crossroads of two major ecosystems and a large body of fresh water. On its northern perimeter is one of the few natural freshwater lakes in California. Tule Lake is a sanctuary for many waterfowl, as well as a water source for larger mammals such as mule deer and pronghorn. Each comes from a different ecosystem found in the monument.
We have two pieces of two ecosystems here at Lava Beds. So we have the Great Basin High Desert ecosystem, which has a lot of the sagebrush and rabbit brush, western junipers, mountain mahoganies, bunch grasses, native bunch grasses. But as you rise towards our very southern boundary, we also have some species of the Cascades Range mixed in. So you start getting into ponderosa pine forest. We do have some really nice old growth ponderosa. And going up on the volcano outside the bounds of Lava Beds and onto the Modoc National Forest, you're truly in Cascades ecosystem with red fir and other species and lots of winter snow.
All of these ecosystems lie before you from the top of Scanchin Butte at Lava Beds National Monument.
Muir Woods National Monument is a fitting tribute for the country's first great conservationists, John Muir and Gifford Pinchot.
Light streaming through fog in redwoods. It is the single image that most symbolizes the preservation movement. An American movement that started in California. Started by the great conservation leader, Gifford Pinchot, when he successfully created the U.S. Forest Service to manage America's remaining woodlands for future generations. His success was followed by John Muir's campaign to set aside wilderness for wilderness' sake. John Muir Woods National Monument is a living testament to this environmental pioneer. In 1908, President Teddy Roosevelt made this monument one of the first in the park system. It is a monument with a single purpose: to preserve a coastal redwood forest. A forest that can be experienced through a solitary walk among these ancient giants. Trees that are in every way special. The coastal redwoods, the evergreen sequoia, is a wonder in the plant kingdom. Its longevity is legendary. Many were growing long before the birth of Christ. They are the tallest trees in the world, many reaching up to over 300 feet in height. And they are the world's largest trees, growing up to as much as 18 feet in diameter. They are resistant to decay, insects, and fire. Coursing through the monument is Redwood Creek. The creek is crossed by 3 bridges. Bridges that the great John Muir once stood on. Below, the occasional egret searches for a meal. The forest is permeated with the most unforgettable sweet fragrance. A fragrance derived from the bay laurel. The understory is carpeted in places with the redwood sorrel. In the wetter areas are stands of arching sword ferns. Hidden among the ground litter are many of California's giant banana slugs, the second largest terrestrial slug in the world. Higher up, big leaf maples provide a touch of fall color. But it is the redwoods themselves that amaze. Just looking up to where these giants reach for the sky is the perfect reward for coming to the monument. Along the trail are trees with fire scars. Scars that are large enough for a person to comfortably enter. Still a mystery as to their purpose are the large burls, sometimes found at the base of the tree, sometimes far up the trunk. A highlight in the monument is the Gifford Pinchot tree, named for the father of American forestry. However, the most impressive of all these redwoods are the magnificent family rings. Fairy circles of trees creating the spectacular redwood groves. The most famous of these in the monument is the Cathedral Grove. A grove made famous when the founding representatives to the United Nations came here in 1945 to memorialize America's great leader, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. One last look to the sky for a final memory of your walk among these ancient giants. The history of Muir Woods National Monument is the history of the men who preserved this old-growth redwood forest less than 20 miles from the San Francisco urban complex. First, there was William Kent, a local San Francisco businessman who bought the property in 1905, in effect saving it from San Francisco's huge rebuilding effort after the 1906 earthquake. 2 years later, Kent began a campaign to permanently preserve the forest. He urged Gifford Pinchot, then head of the U.S. Forest Service, to convince Teddy Roosevelt to accept the old-growth forest as a gift to the U.S. government. Roosevelt and naturalist friend John Muir agreed. It was the first such gift to be made into a national monument. But it was the man for whom the monument is named who had the greatest impact on changing how America viewed untouched wilderness. For much of America's early history, wilderness was something to be conquered, eliminated in favor of cities and farmland. But by the middle of the 19th century, a sense started to grow among some people that wilderness had inherent value for human well-being, and that the native plants and animals had a right to survive on their own terms. The first person to give a voice to this sense was John Muir.
John Muir was a famous naturalist. He's probably the most esteemed naturalist in American history. And John Muir was born in Dunbar, Scotland in the 1800s, and his family immigrated to the United States, to Wisconsin, in his early childhood. And when he got a little bit older, he ended up working in a wagon shop. And it was at that time that there was an accident, and he actually lost vision in one of his eyes. And he had to sit in a dark room with his eyes bandaged for about 4 months. And during that time, he thought about all the beautiful places he had read about in the world, and then he made a pact with God. And he said that if his eyesight came back, he would give up on the pursuit of money and just travel the world, seeing all the beautiful places that had to be seen.
And this he did. He traveled and wrote about the beauty and value of nature as no one had ever done before. Muir finally ended up in California, where he joined Gifford Pinchot and Teddy Roosevelt in becoming the fathers of the American conservation movement. But eventually, toward the end of his life, Muir had an awakening to take conservation one step further. It was called preservationism. Tim Babelis is an environmental historian for the Park Service based out of San Francisco.
The term preservation or preservationism is you often hear it alongside of conservation. I'm not sure exactly who coined the term preservation or preservationism, but it's closely associated with John Muir, the famous naturalist who spent so much time in Yosemite. John Muir and his colleagues in the Sierra Club, which they founded in 1893, used the term preservation to distinguish their activities and their interests, their goals, from that of the conservationists. Now remember, the conservationists were interested in preserving forest resources for future generations, not to end all resource utilization, not to end logging or other forms of economic activities, but simply to regulate them. Now the preservationists, by contrast, wanted to set these lands aside and exclude most economic activities like logging, like mining, and to create reserves or parks. This was one of the reasons why John Muir was so active in the early establishment and development of Yosemite National Park, and then for that matter, the entire Park Service and other parks as well.
In the end, Muir broke with both Pinchot and Kent. Kent because he wanted to provide easy access to his beloved Muir Woods. Today we can thank all three for a healthy national forest system. National parks that preserve and hold open to the American public the wonder of the nation's unique ecosystems and geological features. And what would have made Muir most happy? A strong and vital network of wilderness lands. Interestingly, in this time of global warming, along California's coast, the redwood trees are growing faster than ever. Sometimes over 6 feet a year.
Minidoka National Monument commemorates a dark chapter in American history, the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II.
It is a place you might miss driving by. No sign or visitor center greets the person who decides to stop. Only the crumbling remains of a stone chimney, a large root cellar, and a few foundations of the many buildings that were once here. But there is also a disturbing sense here, a sense of one of the darkest chapters in American history.
In reviewing the diaries, letters, listening to oral histories of people who were there, I think the sense of isolation was probably the most dramatic sense that people have of the place, and that can still be captured. So if you know something about the fact that you had almost 10,000 people, well, ultimately 13,000 people who were there, and how many of them saw that as one of the most dramatic impacts on their lives. And there are still places on the site that you can stand and see pretty much what those who were there in 1942 to 45 could see, and try to imagine yourself in their position, not able to go home.
The reason they were not able to go home is that they were prisoners in an internment camp. Some would say a concentration camp. It was a time when American citizens were incarcerated without due process. After Imperial Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, Japanese Americans living on the West Coast from Seattle to Los Angeles were rounded up without cause and moved to camps far to the east. Minidoka National Monument was one of the 10 major camps where over 120,000 Americans were interned. Set aside by President Bill Clinton in 2001, Minidoka is one of the newest and least developed monuments in the park system. The location of Minidoka is in a harsh climate. It is dry, barren scrub in Idaho's Snake River Basin. But it is a land that can be brought to life with water. Water can turn this land into an agricultural paradise. Japanese Americans were not only incarcerated here, but also were forced to make this desolate place prosperous through hard labor. Build canals, irrigate the land, and grow food. Dr. Robert Sims is an historian who has studied this horrendous act in American history and has been instrumental in the efforts to preserve Minidoka.
This is part of a large planned reclamation area, the Minidoka Reclamation Project, a very large agricultural development project. And the hope was that by bringing this population in, they might help make some progress in bringing that land under irrigation and into cultivation, which in fact they did.
The ancestors of the families incarcerated at Minidoka arrived on America's shores along the West Coast, starting in the late 19th century. They were industrious and worked in the agricultural fields of California. They built Japan towns in the major West Coast cities. But from the beginning, they were a persecuted minority. An anti-Japanese American sentiment sprang up immediately after Pearl Harbor. Unsupported reports of subversive Japanese American activities grew. On February 19, 1942, Executive Order 9066 was signed by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The War Department now had authority to remove Japanese American families from their homes and force them into isolated camps. Camps that needed to be built from scratch by the prisoners. And so they did. They built whole cities, barracks for living, food storage facilities, even schools for their children. Today at Minidoka, this once prison city is a collection of ruins. One of the most prominent is right where the internees entered the camp.
The entryway is across the canal, which is the border of the southern part of the National Monument. And you do see the portions of the original entry gate. It's a stone building that had a partial wood structure built on it, and the wood is all gone, but the stone is there, as well as the stone in a very large chimney and a low rock wall immediately adjacent. It was part of a waiting room. When people were entering the camp or leaving the camp, they would have that for warming or just sitting.
Annette Rousseau is a park ranger.
I'm standing in the remains of one of the completely internally built root cellars. This was used for storage of the food that when they brought it in from the farm. So if you look up above, you'll notice beautiful detail in the work. You've got the poles holding the roof up, and you've got the lattice system that they used, and then you see the bales of hay that were used to insulate, what looks to be tar paper, and then the dirt on top of it with the vegetation growing. So it was almost mimicking a sod house. What was nice about this is that it kept the vegetables and fruits fresh throughout the whole season.
Nothing conveys the sadness that once inhabited this site more than the remains of a Japanese rock garden.
There wasn't much beauty there. The internees themselves actually helped develop some beauty there, including rock gardens and remnants of one of the major rock gardens, which was just in front of the administrative area. That's the other feature you'll see immediately.
One of the neat features of this rock garden are these paths. As you can see, they're lined with basalt rock. These paths were built by the internees because when the Minidoka was created, they cleared it of all the vegetation. And so when it rained, what you ended up with was large fields of mud. And in order to make it a little easier to walk around and not sink into the mud, they created these paths using all different rocks. And these paths actually crisscrossed all the way through Minidoka. And then you have these beautiful rock garden areas. This is a traditional Japanese rock garden, and there would have been interdisplayed in it would be flowers and such.
Gardens that were made with great care and love. Interestingly, many of the young men from all the internment camps volunteered for the military and fought gallantly against the fascist enemy in Europe. In 1945, this and other camps were closed. However, many of the prisoners no longer had homes to return to. So they dispersed across the country to many of the nation's urban centers. Urban centers that today have thriving Japanese-American communities. In 1988, Congress passed and President Ronald Reagan signed legislation that issued an official apology to this country's Japanese-American citizens for the great injustice thrust upon them. An injustice that can still be felt at the Minidoka ruins. In 2008, its status was changed from national monument to historic site.
Thank you for joining me in the telling of 3 pivotal chapters in the history of the Pacific Northwest. I'm Jordan Murphy.